Hey, y'all. Welcome to episode number 75 of Gabfocus. I'm Tommy. I've got Melissa with me. Melissa, how you doing today?
Fantastic.
We got some
Ready
good
for
guys
show
hanging
number
out with us.
75.
It's so crazy. We've been doing this. This is our 75th time to do
Yeah.
this, and so fun. And that included some pop-up episodes. That included some version two, the follow-up episodes because we can't stop talking about doors. I mean, just so many
Right.
fun moments.
Right.
And this is the first time in all 75 episodes. We've had some repeat topics, right? Of course, we've talked about marketing and SEO and doors and operations and all these kinds of things. We've never talked about disaster.
I don't
So
know how we made it that long without talking about it because there's
yeah,
been a lot of disasters happen
there
over the
has
last 5
been some
years.
disaster
Yeah.
happening. So,
Yeah.
so anyways, y'all, welcome to Gap Focus. We're stoked to have this, to get to do this, but even more stoked to have two really awesome dudes to join us here. We've got Kevin Leebrick, longtime Pug Pack member. He runs My Storage Ops. They manage and own a bunch of facilities, mostly here in the Southeast. They have had their fair share of disaster. Kevin's been in the storage space since 2010, getting into his 16th year, which is really, really cool to see. Kevin, welcome to the Gap Focus stage, man.
Hey, thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you here. So, for the folks who don't know you in the audience, give us your quick 30-second bio and why you are specifically seasoned and the guy that we want to hear from when it comes to disaster.
Yeah, so like Tommy said, been in since 2010. And as I say, I sat behind the desk for 10 years. So I did the manager thing for 10 years. A couple years before I got out from the desk, I started my management company and we've grown sort of organically since then. So I am here because I've had a fire, a flood, and a mudslide, I guess, all in the last 14 months now? And all that happened
Oh,
within about 3 months. So we've had some experience doing some things.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
excited
so
to talk about the photo that you have in your background. We will get to that. So yeah, Kevin, welcome back to Gap Focus, man. Glad to have you here. And for the first time, Scott, welcome to the stage, my friend. How you do?
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me,
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to it for
Yeah.
sure.
So, Sentry Self Storage Management. Scott's a great dude out of Florida, based in Florida. Been in storage since 1998, which is really cool. So, seen lots of things, and especially in Florida, seen lots of things. So, yeah, for the folks in the audience who might know who you are, give us your 30-second intro and why you are, your experience can speak to disaster and prep.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, like Kevin, I think time behind the desk, doing what our frontline troops do is very important, and I spent that time way back in '98, of course. But I think where I might be able to lend a little bit of perspective here is that I have managed assets in different parts of the country. So, West Coast, South, Midwest, and so definitely see a different type of disaster, potential in those areas. But nonetheless, Sentry is a boutique management company. We do our own development and management. We also consult with folks. That tends to be our organic growth. Again, like Kevin's, comes from the relationships when you consult with someone through the entire development process, right? It's a 3-year deal. And by that time, it just makes sense for us to manage. So we do third-party management as well in 5 states now.
Wow. All right. So you can run the gamut. You can speak to a lot of different folks.
I
Uh,
can remember it all. It's been a long time, Tommy.
well, guys, thanks for spending your afternoon with us, and especially on our 75th episode. It's truly an honor. Gap Focus, of course, is brought to you by our teams here in Knoxville at StoragePug and Lighthouse Storage Solutions over in Chattanooga. If this is your first episode, welcome. We go for about an hour. Melissa and I will take turns asking all the questions, and Scott and Kevin will take turns answering all the questions. Now, if you have your own questions that you want to ask, put it in the Q&A tool. It's a great place. Melissa and I will keep our eyes out for that. Of course, you're welcome to be in the chat. The chat's already popping off very strong here today, learning lots about folks. Welcome to chat with your fellow attendees. However, if you want your question asked, put it in the Q&A. That's where we'll guarantee to see it. So today's agenda, we'll talk about what happens when disaster strikes. We're going to talk about how you recover from disasters, and then probably just as important is how do you prepare for when next time something crazy hits. And then we'll wrap it up with our question of the week. So, Melissa, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so let's just kind of unpack what we're talking about. What are some of the common disasters and or crisis events that happen in storage?
Scott, you want to take it?
Yeah, I'd be glad to start. So again, you think depending on where you're at in the country, naturally those things are going to be a little bit different. Here in South Florida, hurricanes are always top of mind, most definitely. But I think the other thing that's important is as our industry has matured and our tenant base has changed, the types of disasters have also changed when we look at the ones that can be caused by our wonderful customers. So lithium ion batteries and
Yeah.
how we react to that and the fires that it has created, for folks to have to deal with. Ultimately, the same kind of a disaster. A fire is terrible, regardless of where it starts or how. But I think the things that we're having to look at as operators is definitely constantly changing as a result of that. Meth labs, illicit activity on the man-made variety, but then, as far as weather-related tornadoes, earthquakes, I saw several comments about moisture-related issues. So if you have a new storage building and it's wrapped real tight and you didn't let your concrete cure properly, or like Melissa, you had mentioned somebody moving in wet items. Those are all things that then become the operator's problem to some extent at some point.
Yep, and I'd add one more to that. Dead bodies, maybe not a natural disaster, but it can definitely be a disaster, needless to say. So
That's a crisis.
That's
Yeah.
a
we've
crisis.
come across
Yeah.
a few of
For
those.
any manager,
here.
yes, that's a
So,
crisis.
unfortunately. So yeah, but no, I think that is a really good all-inclusive list there Scott gave, certainly.
Yeah. So Kevin, you've had some crazy stories. But let's talk about the most recent ones, right? So of course, the southeast here, we had the 100-year storm, the 100-year flood, the 100-year rain, and it impacted a lot of communities, and specifically the communities that you were in. Talk to us about that storm, and honestly, tell us about let's start with the first 24, 48 hours of this event.
Yep. So I grew up in Florida, so I used to hurricanes and so forth, but Helene came through, and like any storm that typically comes up here, it's strong, but it's like a thunderstorm. So didn't think a ton about it really, but as it got closer, we got a little bit more nervous when we started hearing some rain, that kind of thing. And so we shut down all of our stuff in the mountains up in the Blue Ridge of North Carolina and Georgia and South Carolina. As a precaution, about 3 p.m. the day before Helene came through. And as that happened, we logged on early the following morning, I believe it was, and watched as the waters came to one of our properties in Hendersonville, outside of Asheville, North Carolina. And finally lost connection there with about a foot of water already in our units that we saw. So we knew we were going to be in trouble there. But then further north, 2.5 hours north in our Banner Elk area, the waters caused a mudslide. And so we had about 6 inches of mud covering our whole lot, inside units, of course, some doors collapsed and that kind of thing. So that was the situation we found ourselves in. So I tried to get up there actually that afternoon, thinking, oh, I'm gonna make it. Well, the wind was still blowing quite well, so I got about an hour down the road, about an hour from the stores, and decided to turn around. Probably not the smartest move. So waited 24 hours and then went up the next day to survey the damage, and it was mind-blowing to say the least. So the picture behind me is actually the one that got flooded about 4 hours after the peak. So we had about 6 feet of water in that property there. So things you don't think about, like how are you going to communicate and that kind of thing, was all real to us, but really just that 24, 48 hours was taking it all in. And then, you know, implementing our initial steps of, okay, here's how we're going to respond.
Well, and if with that particular storm, communications were down for a couple of days. So I feel
Mhm.
like your first 24, 48, maybe even, a couple of days past that, you were like, there's not really anything I can actually do.
Yeah, and that was right. Is like, and we were sending them out anyways because we were one of the owner of these properties lives down in Florida, Fort Lauderdale area. So, you know, we had a Starlink waiting. So we were able to bring that up and bring a generator up day one. Um, well, the next day,
Right.
hour 24 to get things going. But we weren't even thinking like, oh, no one else has, you know, cell towers out. So we were without cell towers and very spotty service, without cell for about 2.5 weeks there
Yeah.
and without real service for almost a month. And so it changes your whole, like, how do you get in touch with people?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can send all the emails remotely like we did, but it does change the game. And so
Yeah.
it is a manpower thing more than anything for us.
Mm, gosh.
Wow. So
I,
beyond, well, you
yeah.
mentioned manpower, right? So like something that I think maybe a lot of operators don't talk about as much, right? We talk about the communication with tenants, the property insurance, all that kind of stuff. But what about your staff, right? The people who live in those communities and maybe potentially are dealing with their own personal damage of their own homes and
Mm-hmm.
properties and vehicles, right? What was your process like for treating and helping your distressed staff and helping them, of course, take care of themselves, but take care of your tenants too?
Yeah, so I mean we it's not something you think of. It's not in your, you know, three-ring binder on what to do with your staff. You just expect everything to go like you have, you know, step one, step two, step three, how to respond. But that was one of the eye-opening things for us is, you know, our staff need us too. So we bring gas up, water up, food up. Our manager at our location is a former military guy, so we were bringing MREs up. He didn't really care. His wife, on the other hand, was not so thrilled about it, but it was food that they could get anyways.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely tough. He had a landslide, or the land basically dropped out within about 20 feet of his front door. And so he's dealing with it, like you said, by himself and just getting gas to come back and forth.
Wow.
We actually have a little apartment above that office, and so he's able to stay there for a couple of days. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that you don't think about, and so that was definitely a wrinkle that we didn't necessarily have planned, and something we've learned from certainly
Yeah.
going
So
forward.
you mentioned right there in the beginning, you tried to drive up there as quick as you could, and then quickly realized, wait, storm's not actually over yet. I'm gonna go back
Yeah,
home.
yeah.
What was on your mind? What was that first thing you were gonna go accomplish in that initial drive out there? What were you aiming to do?
Yeah, so my initial thought was get up there and just survey. Let's see what we have. And again, we already knew that property was flooding, so for us
Hmm.
it was like, how bad is it versus is everything okay?
Right.
And so that's just my initial thought. I think, you know, weathering hurricanes in Florida, like Scott has, you go outside when it's pretty much done and you start surveying and seeing what
Right.
damage you have.
Okay.
So that was the initial thought. Of course, when I couldn't get up there, knowing what would happen, we went ahead and started the insurance claim in that 24
Yeah.
hour, 12-hour period that's waiting to leave again. So
Okay. So you got a jump start on that.
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Was there anything that, hindsight, that you wish you had done initially instead of what maybe you did?
Um, you know what? In that situation, I think it's all hands on deck thing, and you start, you know, consulting with, you know, owners and other operators, your
Mhm.
managers that weren't necessarily affected, on what to do. Helene was so big, and we didn't have power in Charlotte either, where I'm based out of, for 3 days. So it was enough to knock everyone off. So we were all just, you know, generators and so forth. But I don't know that we do necessarily anything different. When we couldn't get up there, we went ahead and filed that insurance claim. I think
That's
in the
very smart, I
following
think.
weeks,
Yeah.
yeah, I think in the following weeks, we would have adjusted things, how we did things and make some changes. And we could talk about that later. But yeah, I don't know. We'd necessarily do anything different. And we did what we could as quick as we could. And that's one thing I'd encourage everyone to do. If you know you have an issue, go ahead and file the claim, get that started, because the longer you wait, the more claims that are going to be having, people are going to be on the phone with, and it's just going to, you're going to be on hold forever and day. I got right through immediately, and was able to get that going. Even though we didn't know the extent of the damage, we knew we had some. So
that's a great reminder, and hopefully folks have good relationships with their insurance agents. They can kind of skip the line or get ahead of the queue. So the sooner you start that process, the better. And that's good tips there. So Scott, I want to turn it to you. So walk us through. I mean, you've had tons of experience, of course, in Florida, but you have West Coast properties as well. Talk us through a recent or maybe a memorable disaster or crisis that y'all had to deal with in your career since 1998.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got my most memorable, the most painful ones are always the best lesson learned, right? And it happened to be early in my career, but I think a couple of just follow-up points that are, Kevin made some really important points as far as insurance and getting out there early. But I think it's, as property managers or property owners, it's also important for us to know who your insurance agent is, especially if you've got maybe multiple providers, multiple stores, who those relationships are, what your coverages look like. Because the other piece of it is, as a property manager, is knowing when, like in Kevin's case, no doubt, hands down, that's an insurance problem. Like we need to get into the queue quickly. But there are times where it may seem severe, but if you know enough to be dangerous about, construction costs or something like that, or repair costs, and maybe at the same time that your deductible is $25,000, right? Being careful about when and where to put that insurance agent on notice sometimes can have a negative impact to your policy, whether a claim is actually filed or not. And so knowing, if the repairs look like they're going to be 15 or 20,000 and your deductible is 25, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And then as far as just if I were to keep in the common theme of the most recent hurricanes that dealt Kevin and most of the folks in that area such a difficult blow, I think the other piece of that is, having the preparation for, especially in Florida, do you have storm panels for windows? Yeah. Do you know where they're stored? Are they stored in an orderly fashion? With the staff turnover we've had, do those folks even know how to put the things on, right? All things that I think are important just to help for when the disaster unleashes and can possibly be as severe as what Kevin dealt with. As far as memorable ones for me, it was very, very early in my career, and basically tornado and straight line winds ripped literally 170 foot of roof off of a storage building and rolled it into a giant bowling ball, is what it looked like on camera. And it ran the entire length of the property down the aisles, using the other buildings as its safety bumpers, if you will, until it finally came to rest. So that was, an early disaster I had to deal with, and it was in a time when we didn't have the ability to text and to do the things we do now in terms of communicating with staff or with our customers and such. And like Kevin, right, his first instinct was to get in the car and go, because you want to put your eyes on it, and whether it's to be there to support whatever needs your staff has, or help deal with customers who are going to naturally be upset, and just to get your eyes on what the heck's going on, because you're going to be fielding 100 questions. So that was part of my first instinct as well, was to be there on site. And, of course, the hindsight, which I'm sure we'll get into down the road, lessons learned is, okay, now I'm there and I'm looking at this giant ball of steel and metal, and but now what do I do? It was kind of the start of the difficult lesson to learn, right? Yeah. And so that one's memorable to me because I was unfortunate that it happened, but fortunate enough that it happened early enough in my career that I learned those types of lessons for the things that I want to make sure I'm prepared for, even if people think I'm a little nuts and a little over the top with a level of preparedness, I'd rather prepare for the worst and hope for the best than have the alternative bite me in the rear end.
I love that your first impulse for both of you is I want to be on site.
Yeah.
Like, let me get there, even if it's
Mhm.
just to see what the problem is and, you know, kind of take it all in. But that gives you a perspective that you can then share with your tenants, whether it's to say, okay, the damage isn't as bad as we anticipated, or yeah, this is pretty rough. You're going to need to deal with us for a little while. We're going to work with you the best we can, but you actually have a better picture than just what you've seen on video or you've heard from someone else. And I think that shows a level of compassion and care that the tenants really, really need in that kind of time. And your management staff needs, because they're also dealing with stuff. So kudos to you guys for that being your first thing. Even though when you got out there and you seen the balled up metal, you couldn't really do anything about it. At least you were there.
What a sight to
Yeah.
see a giant ball of metal roof is
I
crazy.
wish I still had the video. It was saved on an old thumb drive, and it was easier to explain to the owners and to everybody else that wanted to see how this happened. Plug this in and look at this. And I
Yeah.
wish I still had it. I wish I
Wow.
still had it.
Yeah, it's one of those you wouldn't believe somebody who just explained it to you. You have to see it with your own eyes.
I feel that way about mudslides too, though. I don't know that I actually have a good perspective on
Right.
that either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We complain about our rain and our humidity here, but keep
Yeah.
the rain coming, keep the
Yeah.
humidity.
Yeah,
I don't
for
want
sure.
mudslides or sinkholes or giant metal balls of roof.
Yeah.
Now, Lindsay had a good question. I think maybe you can dive, both of y'all, we'll give y'all a chance to dive a little bit deeper of like, what's the most effective way to communicate updates to tenants before, during, and after these disasters, especially when there's power and internet outages, like we talked about earlier with what happened in North Carolina? So yeah, so best communication techniques before, during, and after. Great question, Lindsay.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think every technique's the best technique. When it's a serious storm, you've got to try, you know, old school paper, but text, phone, email, social media. You've got to get out there, and they're not going to blame you for what happened, but they're going to blame you for not communicating. That's one of the
Yeah.
lessons we've learned.
Wow.
So just being out there in front of it and trying to control the narrative a little bit and keep them as informed as possible. So the first week or 10 days, it was an email every single day, sometimes twice a day, sent from Wilmington because
Mhm.
they had power. They weren't affected out there. They weren't getting to it hindsight. Didn't quite think that all through, but we were sending them out and we had notes and obviously everyone's accounts that we were doing such. And then the other thing we started doing is printing notes out and leaving them on the doors overnight because obviously our hours were affected. So, but we leave it, you know, on the door. And at one point, I think we had 8 or 9 pieces of paper up there communicating things because the old school way is how we had to sort of go back without the tech that we could use. So.
Wow. Yeah. So Scott, same question to you. What are your tips on before, during, after these disasters?
Yeah. I mean, Kevin's pretty well spot on. Is you can't over communicate because you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're going to have customers that are upset when you over communicate with them, but the alternative is, I think, much worse. But thinking through the things like, how are you going to communicate if you can't use your FMS texting tools because there's no power? Or what are you going to do if you have no cell phone coverage, right? You have to kind of have contingencies upon contingencies. One of the things we like to do when we know we have a storm brewing is we start that communication with the tenants prior to having any power issues. I typically will start a text thread with myself, the appropriate district manager, and the store or stores that will be involved, so that we have a method to communicate, provided we have the ability to do so with cell phone. But the other piece, and Kevin, indicated being able to take advantage of Wilmington having power, is think through those contingencies. If you're fortunate enough to have alternatives, whether it's other stores or even people in other geographic areas that may not be impacted, but willing to help you in the event you have to communicate in a different way. I mean, we're fortunate that in today's environment, we've got web-based platforms. So provided the power stays on, but then, as long as you've thought about that, what if there is no power, as an example, then if you're having to put signs, handwritten signs on the door for people that stop by and find that the place is locked up tighter than a drum, at least you're able to communicate. And I think that's a big part of preparing for these things ahead of time, is come up with your plan A, B, and C and think of different things that might happen as a part of that. Losing power, having flood on top of high winds, or how this might progress over stages, as an example, and then preparing accordingly.
Yeah, no.
I think one other thing we had anyways is we had 2 different call center companies call and say, hey, do you need us to handle your calls for what was coming in? Which shows what kind of industry we're in. I mean, they're saying, hey, we'll do it free of charge, just whatever you guys need, we'll step up. And I found that like really encouraging about our industry. So afterwards,
That's awesome.
we at least had that option. We didn't need to use it, but we had it. So
Really incredible.
Well, and
Yeah.
you also mentioned there in the beginning, Kevin, about social media, because I think it's a natural thing for all of us today, at least when there's a natural disaster or a crisis of some sort, we all pick up our phone and we look at Facebook. And so if you have a social platform for your facility, don't be afraid to post on there, because sometimes that gets through where a text message or a phone call might not. The social media sometimes does. So I know Matt Volatin, he used video updates from his facility during Helene, where he would go out to the site and he would video himself, like, here's the latest update today. If you're having trouble making your payments, or if you're having trouble with access, here's kind of what's going on. And just to keep his tenants kind of updated on what was happening. But he uses his social media regularly too. So, but if you've got that platform, think outside the box and use that.
Absolutely. And I see some great comments here. So Tamara, they posted still shots from their security footage on social media, which is great. Lindsay followed up and said, yeah, every technique, including going down to the old gas stations and talking to the folks there. I mean, I think this is all super duper.
Yeah.
And I see this new comment from Lana here,
Yeah.
down in Louisiana. I mean, they know some disasters down there. So when you know your store is affected, order a dumpster ASAP, as they will be in short supply. Also order a truckload of boxes and give them away to customers and others affected by disaster. That's incredible. And that's actually our segue. So like, let's go from disaster struck, it's happened, you're doing your job, communicating during, before, after. Let's talk about recovering, right? So in the crazy tornado scenario, and then Kevin, in your North Carolina 100-year storm scenario, how long did it take to recover from these big major crises?
It's funny you asked, Tommy. So both with the flood and the mudslide we had a couple hours up the road, we're still not through it. Um, the mudslide, I had a great manager there who, has been in the town for 69 years, so she knows everyone. She was able to really pull it up by the bootstraps and find locals who, worked at the diner or deli in town, and we paid them to come in and help clean up there. Still have a bunch of road work going out in front of us up there. We're now starting to get a couple sinkholes forming that we're having to work with the state to resolve. And then with the flood, we've got now 4 of 6 buildings open up. But it's going to be years before I think we're truly back to a normal. I bet it's 2028 before we're truly back there, to a normal sort of life cycle. I was talking to Robert High, who's an operator in North Carolina, and he warned me very early on, I think 2 or 3 days in. He said, Kevin, just be prepared. It's a bite of the apple a day. And that's truly what it is. And you've got to remind yourself about that. I can't tell you how many tears were shed by staff and tenants, and we just a bite of apple a day, bite of the apple a day, and just you take that to heart when you have such a scope of work. And so recovery's still going for us, and it probably will for physically we'll get back to it, I hope by the end of the year.
Wow.
But it's still going on. Yeah, it's gonna be with us.
Yeah. Scott,
Gosh.
same to you. The giant bowling ball metal
Yeah,
roof.
if we
What
go
was
back,
that recovery period look like?
if we go back to that one, it ended up being 4 to 5 months recovery time, but there was an interesting lesson in that, being that it was my first real crisis to deal with. And part of what is, the whole insurance aspect, knowing who to get in touch with and what that looks like. But then as operators in the operations role, your instinct is to get things done. And wanting to get things done, the lesson I learned from that is, I think I probably, by dealing with the adjuster, probably got in the way a little bit, and I should have stayed in my lane. And that's definitely a lesson where once the adjuster has been assigned and they start asking questions, I have seen over the years where some of those questions inherently end up in the realm of, depending on how you're looking at it, but how can I get them to do some of my job for me, for lack of a better way to put it. And because you're, operator and you're a go-getter and you're trying to resolve things, you start getting in the way and tracking things down. And then now that you're sending things to the adjuster, now the adjuster's sending things back to you instead of straight to the vendors. And so I think a big part of that, it was, 4 to 5 month recovery that probably would have gone a little more efficient had I known then what I know now about, I've done my job. Now I'm going to stay in my lane and take care of my customers and my staff and hold the insurance folks accountable, but I'm not going to get in the way of what's between the adjuster and the vendors and how they solve the problems. So definitely an important piece
Good
of the
point.
lesson I learned there.
Tommy, we've got a lot of questions that have come in.
Should we tackle some of these? I mean, these are
Yeah,
all
because
great questions.
they're kind of in that recovery kind of
Yeah.
field here. So Tracy has a good one here. How do you address tenants that are unable to come to the facility? Because I know that's one of the first things we ask is, hey, once we've secured everything and it's safe, you want the tenant to come out and actually evaluate their stuff. Is this trash? What are we going to do with it now? What if they can't make it? What do you do with that?
That's a great question. Where we're at in South Florida, we've got a lot of international customers, or customers who are what we call yachties, where they spend 6 months out of the year working on yachts all over the country, right? And they can't make it out if we have a problem. So basically what we try to do is, once it's safe and once everything has been made sure that, we've cleaned up everything that we can clean up and made safe for our customers to be on site, is either they're, if they're willing to allow us permission to open the unit, we will videotape or photograph the contents of the unit, resecure it, and then priority mail them the keys to the new lock, to where they still keep care, custody, and control. But we're definitely, I think, whichever way you go with that, it's all about how you document your attempts to notify them and the types of things that were going on. If there was excessive moisture, or if you had a foot of water throughout the whole entire property, chances are by the time they do come look at their things, there's going to be mold. And so you need to be able to just show the trail for, I think, the attempts that you made to take care of them, but also giving them the information maybe they need if they go to their homeowner's insurance for coverage down the road, or things that they're going to need if they take advantage of your protection plan or a tenant insurance of some kind. So that we found to be important.
Yeah,
So
I think. Oh, go ahead.
No, well, I had a follow-up question, and maybe Kevin, I'm sure you can probably address this. What about that tenant that you never actually hear back from, or they just lack of response, and this has gone on for months, and a foot of water or mud or whatever was inside their unit, everything is ruined. Logistically, you can't let this stay because it's going to continue to create problems for the rest of your tenants. At what point do you make that business decision of, I have documented this with a video and all the pictures I can. I've tried to communicate. We have to just go in and clear it out and get rid of it. How do you work through that process? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean,
Question. Kevin's, you probably got some of those you're dealing with now, I would guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think Scott hit on one thing: document, document, document. Just like you can't communicate enough with your tenant, you can't take enough pictures, videos, notes. And as we're finding out, that is a key to probably long-term recovery. But we made the call about 45 days after doing that, trying to reach out. Pretty much utilities had been restored by then. We ended up sending out termination letters. We communicated with a couple of lawyers about it first, but we needed to secure the property as well for ourselves to be able to assess what's going on. And so we sent out termination letters about 45 days in to anyone that we weren't able to notify that, hey, we're not going to renew your lease. And so, roughly 30 days after that, we were able to get in there and start the cleanup process. But it's difficult. You realize that could have been all they had left.
Yeah.
We had people flying in from Blackhawks, landing at the high school right down the road. We saw, every 4 or 5 minutes, private and military, copters coming in. And, so we knew what we were facing at that point, and just how big it was. But it's a very difficult decision, to make that, what, these people might come at some point and it's not going to be here. And we had some of those tough conversations, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah. Christine, I see your question here. Does anyone have a checklist of some sort to help for preparation? Love this one. We're actually putting together, I chatted with our team. We're going to be putting together a resource, so look out for that. We're going to put something together. Some of it's going to come from this very, this very episode here. So look out for that. Couple questions around tenant, since we're on this conversation, this thread of tenant communication, and maybe people you can't get a hold of. Do you continue to charge customers as normal? Like, does auto pay continue business as usual? What's y'all's typical policy?
well, we went from 92% occupied down to 7 within 45 days. And so we anyone that could get out during that period of time, we charged, but then we refunded it back on the back end just to make sure we have a legal binding lease there, sort of thing. So we did, but then again, we refunded. And the folks that wanted to stay, we gave them 2 months free. We tried to work with people as much as possible and have them move to different units. But in that kind of situation, how much is salvageable?
Wow.
And so we definitely gave breaks. And then we had a couple handyman tenants that stayed around, and we were able to use them as well in credit accounts for rent. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. So at the end of the day, we didn't charge. We did charge, but we didn't charge. But it's a tough call to make, especially when you realize, the livelihood of that property is down the drain.
And that's part of the insurance claim piece is the loss of business. So, yeah, gosh. So many hard decisions made, I feel like, on an hourly basis that you guys were having to face. Like, in every hour something new came up and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I handle this piece? So
yeah. And then did y'all let Karen's question, so this is kind of related, but like, what if a tenant just says, you know what, it's damaged, I want to stop. Did you let your tenants just leave their damaged items at the property? What was y'all's policy for those, specific groups of people?
For us, that was a lesson learned not to. But they have the reality of how you're going to stop them. Like everyone had so much going on. Life changed from that day. And so, as much as we said yes and had dumpsters there for them to dump stuff out, you can't stop that. So we had $130,000 of debris removal.
Wow.
So that most of that's not going to be covered under insurance, unfortunately. And so that's been a lesson learned. But again, hindsight, what are you going to truly do about it when, people have lost everything?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's
So,
wild.
um,
Well,
I'm
Scott,
sure from the tenant perspective, like what they had in storage was not as important as what they had in their own home that also got flooded and,
yeah,
so
and
yeah,
wow.
those,
I don't know about Scott, but we found the people that were most affected at home were the most understanding. The ones that, were up on higher ground for us that, lost power and internet and cell.
Mm,
In my head, I'm playing this lady just cussing us out left and right that we didn't have power at the gate and she couldn't get their stuff. And I'm just
mm,
like, people died. Like, you see the helicopters coming in still. I mean, it's literally 72 hours afterwards. So, it puts it into perspective, I think.
mm. So
wow.
we talked a little bit about the working with your staff who already was distressed because of damage and stuff they had at home or emergencies that they were dealing with. What about after this recovery process where they've been cussed out? They've had to counsel people who, show up at their facility hoping that something's been salvaged and to find it's all gone and they're playing counselor and, all of those really hard conversations, or we had to make the decision to throw your stuff away and now you show up wondering about it. The residual effects, I'm sure, on the staff has got to just build up over time. So have you had issues having to deal with the staff in that way?
I can jump in on that. I
Mhm.
think just like, and even add some, commentary on the insurance piece. Melissa, you brought up an important part about business income loss.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That just kind of points back to whether you're circling back after the fact and looking at everything that happened and what insurance coverage gaps do we have. I think that's a very important, definitely piece to look at to
Mhm.
make sure that you're as protected as you can be, or the owners you work for are as protected as they can be. And then likewise, knowing if you're offering your employees insurance, make sure you kind of know those in and outs. Kevin probably is pretty hands-on knowledgeable about it if he's a direct part of the decision making, like I am with those policies and such. But most of those policies, or if you have a PEO involved, like we do,
Mhm.
help take care of our employees, they offer, therapeutic help. And so I think a big part of that, to address kind of Melissa, your question and concern, is making sure you know how that works and then being able to convey that to your team, right? Particularly if it's somebody that's telling you, I'm fine, but you can clearly see they're not. And then it's getting that one-on-one with that particular person, and hopefully having a conversation that ends with them at least giving it a try, right? You obviously need to talk to somebody, doesn't have to be me, but we do have
Mhm.
resources for you. And I think if you have those things, knowing about them is important, and how to go about putting the right folks in touch with people, because you're absolutely right. I mean, it's very hard on our frontline employees, very hard on the
Mhm.
managers, storage consultants, and they tend to be the ones that take a back seat to whoever's being the squeakier wheel, which is most
Mm,
often the customers, whether it's
Right.
people being unreasonable, like Kevin alluded to, or people even being understanding, but they're there 3 times a day to see what's going on and when can they get access and all of those things. And so your staff ends up kind of handling all of that without being thought about. And so, yeah, just knowing what tools you might have to offer them to give them some kind of respite or outlet is important.
Mhm.
yeah. How do you specifically support them when the customer's like, um, you mentioned the insurance piece and really having a good foundation understanding, right? But the customer is just like, unfortunately, the insurance doesn't cover this particular damage, where it's flood or, tornado or fire or what have you. And they're yelling or they're very, mad at the manager and it's the manager's fault for this. How do you support your management? How do you support your staff in those specific scenarios? Betty asked this question earlier.
That's a good question. Lots of good questions. I think knowing when and where, whether it's the district manager or myself or somebody else that is other than the site level employee taking both barrels just for being the person there at the site. I think knowing when and where to step in and try to apply as much empathy as you can and explain the situation. That person's going to be upset regardless. But if you can apply that patience and empathy, then and take the heat off of your employee to allow them to move down the road with something different that they're also dealing with, it's probably just as important, or the next customer in line or whatever it is, just kind of sharing some of that, allowing the frustrated customers to get off their chest what then might help things along, but ultimately the message isn't going to change because naturally we can't do, hey, we're not liable, but in this one case, we'll go ahead and do this for you, because then you're not being fair to your other customers. So you kind of have to keep a unified front in terms of how you deal with those things.
Yeah, one thing we did is we had two people in the office at all times after the flood, because we're walking tenants out to units, and then we wanted another one there, and we'd sort of pass them off. Like we started almost having roles as like, this one's going to take care of the showing units, and this one's going to comfort people. And so you almost start to specialize in it.
I'm sure.
Which sounds weird. We always
like,
joke
you do
we're
this
shrinks.
better than I do.
Right. We're shrinks and sociologists and psychologists and and so forth. We joked about it, but really, I mean, a lot of those, sob stories and divorces and all that stuff that you deal with on a regular basis, some of that almost came back to you to deal with, but is on a much bigger level. And so we were really careful to have two people there, one to deal with it. We're in the Bible Belt, so we had a former pastor that's our maintenance guy that we had up there. And so, he would pray with people, which went really well for us, I think. It sort of took the edge off, even on people that were, using 4-letter language around it. He would just slide in and say, "Hey, can I just pray with you?" And it sort of calmed the water. So I don't know if that's legit, but it worked for us in the Bible Belt.
Wow.
It worked. So, but it's a difficult thing to do, and sometimes you do have to step in. And there are a couple times we just had to ask people to leave because they just want it calmed down, and it's so unfortunate, but you can understand it in the circumstance.
Wow. A call back to a question from earlier about I think Karen might have asked it, of like, what do you do if the tenant doesn't want to come pick up their stuff, right? They just want to officially move out. Lynn Sykes, storage assets from Storage Asset Management, put a comment I think is really great to call out. If the items are not salvageable and the customer do not want to deal with their stuff, just have them sign a disposal waiver or an ownership transfer, and of course take the pictures, and that helps you document in case the customer changes their mind down the road. That's a very good legitimate way of handling it. So great advice.
Yeah, we had quit and releases, both e-sign and paper, that we had going on. So yeah, that's great, Lynn.
Yeah. So Kevin, you mentioned earlier insurance, right? The debris cleanup, right? $130K worth of debris cleanup, not covered by the insurance. What else was not covered by insurance that you weren't prepared for?
So I would tell you, insurance is not your friend. They're there to make money at the end of the day. And you can have the Rolls Royce of flood policies and everything else, but don't count on it. That's what we have found out. Through this whole thing, we've gone through 3 different adjusters, and it seems like every time, it's back to the beginning. So we actually went 9 months before we saw our first BI check come through, business interruption check come through. And it actually just last week, we got some money in to help run the business, essentially, to help recover.
Wow.
But so that's coming up on a year. I mean,
almost
11 months basically.
Yeah.
Before we had any any type of funding from our insurance company. So it's been really rough, but document, and make sure that you're keeping the communication going, whether they communicate back with you, hey, where are we at with this? You know, are you missing anything from me? What do we need to do? So we end up hiring a public adjuster to come in on our behalf. So we had about another month. We got an attorney pretty early on. Just we saw some things that we thought probably not going in our direction right now. I think we had maybe 2 or 3 communications with the adjuster in the first 4 months and said, okay, we need some help. So, yeah, super important. Just keep up that communication, and I don't want to say pester your insurance, but you need to make sure you're doing your part to keep it moving, because they have a million other, probably 40, 50,000 other claims they're dealing with right now. So you need to be your own advocate when it comes to your property insurance.
Wow.
Well, and if you don't already have a relationship with your agent, you need to establish one. Before the tragedy happens, before the crisis, you need to be in contact with your agent, sit down every year, go over your policy, go over all the ins and outs. What am I missing? Are there any holes in this? Should this be more specific for our industry? Ask those questions. You can't ask enough questions, and go ahead and have that back and forth relationship with them. So if something does happen, you can actually pick up the phone and call the person that you know, and they could help be an advocate for you as well. I feel like lots of times though, we're stuck dealing with the adjusters because you might not even really know your agent. You bought the policy and you moved on, kind of thing. So
to add a wrinkle into it for us, we got we're dropping you letter from our insurance company within 30 days of all this happening. So that's been a whole nother wrinkle we've dealt with.
Wow.
Is going out and getting insurance when you have open claims.
Well,
it's
you've got
very difficult.
pre-existing conditions, Kevin.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of fun with it. Let's say that.
Wow, that's brutal. Yeah, my facility has 8 feet of water in it. Will you secure it for me? Will you insure it? Wow, that's really bonkers. Those are things that I don't know that I've thought about, honestly.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Scott, let's talk about preparation, right? So, like, obviously, tough to prepare for a tornado because it can just pop up, and tough to prepare for 100-year storm because by nature of it, it shouldn't happen that often. But, like, what would you do differently today to prepare for disaster compared to what maybe you did earlier in your career in the late 1990s or 2000s?
Sure. And I think it's applicable. The lessons over the years have kind of led to and culminated to where, I think particularly for a hurricane, for example, because it doesn't get much better of a scenario for a bad situation if you've got a week to 10 days notice, like, hey, this thing might be coming our way. And then having a very clear, well thought out plan, like, this is what we're doing. We're 8 days out, we're 6 days out. Kevin, made mention of communicate and over communicate. So starting that plan that you've spent the off-peak season thinking through, and every time you have something go wrong, I think an important thing to do is have a post-event meeting. And touch on those things. What went well, what stung us, and adjust your plan. I don't think your plan is one that when you think it's buttoned down 100%, then you put it on the shelf and wait till you need it. I think it's important that you constantly look at it, update it with as fast as things are changing, whether it's with insurance or, how you reach out and make contact with your customers and things like that. Constantly making sure, for example, our hurricane plan, if you will, our hurricane checklist involves a pre-hurricane season prep check. And then goes into a litany of pre-made templates, if you will, for text messaging and emails to make it very easy and quick to fire things off, and then notices for if we're going to close the property, for example, and what that looks like to customers, and then notices that go out day of, the next day after the event, and as we progress through the event, all very important. But then equally important is, as part of the annual checklist at the site level, the site team's going through their hurricane crash kits, which are applicable for more than just a hurricane, right? Power being out, a flood causing issues, and you lose the ability to access the property. Being able to go old school if you have to and go back to paper, and having all of the paper in the Rubbermaid tubs current, so that you have methods to contact customers if you can't pull up your FMS, for example. But that stuff has to be refreshed on a regular basis. So just making sure the plan that you have in place is good and constantly updated, but then being ready to work the plan, not pulling the plan off the shelf and saying, oh my goodness, we haven't updated for a year, and so half of it is irrelevant at this point.
I think that post-op is just critical, because that you really learn, whatever disaster it is, you learn what in that binder is just head knowledge and what actually works, and then you're able to go out and adjust that accordingly. I mean, I feel like we probably kept 2 or 3 pages worth of stuff in there and got rid of 20 actually going through it, and so I think, but that is so critical, and take it from an owner's perspective, mid-level manager's perspective, and the manager. Like, don't make sure you're getting all perspectives when you're building that out, because there's different things that you might not think of as a owner as you would as a manager, and that's been really useful to us, like roles and how to take that.
I love the pre-written text messages and to
So
give you a draft, because in the middle
Mhm.
of all the crazy, it's sometimes it's hard to put words together. And so if you just have a draft that just gets you started, sometimes that can be really, really valuable. I love that. I think that's a great idea. Let's see, what other questions do we have here, or do we need? It's already 3 o'clock, Tommy.
It's already 3 o'clock. I know. There's still a couple more. So, a couple really good ones that were asked, by the audience. They submitted it before. So let me ask these.
Yeah.
And we'll
Okay.
do
Yeah.
question of the week. So talk to us through multiple locations. I think this is great because both Scott and Kevin oversee multiple locations, right? And in multiple geographic locations. But if you have multiple locations, what are the key things to prioritize when you are preparing?
Ways to in the same area, I guess, like in terms of context.
Maybe you're the regional manager and you oversee a slew of locations in a particular area.
Yeah. I think if you've got the potential for multiple stores to be impacted by the same event, it's all going to be about how you coordinate. You want your message to be consistent, and I'll say this, all day long. Regional manager or district manager's job is the hardest at any company, because you're getting pulled from above, pulled from below, and pulled in all different directions, and you're expected to have the answer at all times. So I think particularly for the folks that you put into those roles, is helping them grow into the role of how to do with and through, and how they inspect what they expect. And so that would be inclusive of making sure that the message that's supposed to go out consistently, whether it's 3 stores or 10 stores, that went out in a consistent manner, so that as much as you can control the preparation side of your plan, that's being worked in a consistent way, I think is the best way to deal with multiple stores. And again, I mentioned putting a text group together. That text group might have 15 people on it.
Wow.
And there may be a very real chance that one of those stores floods, but the other 3 or 4 keep power. And so it may be a shift in who's doing what by when. It may be one store taking phones or dealing with customer notifications for the sake of the other store whose staff is buried dealing with problems that are very of the physical nature on site, whether it's having to take people to their units and those kinds of things. So having the ability to communicate across that group is probably an important piece of that.
Yeah, love that advice. Yeah, so the best thing to do is to coordinate. Great tips there. So then the other question that was submitted before the show by Stop and Go Storage in Springfield is, what would you recommend for an area that has sporadic flooding? I've had one area flood a few times and we can't quite figure out why it happens. When it does happen, of course, customers get very upset and insurance does not cover flooding damage. Kevin, I'll throw this one to you since you are in the thick of it. What do you recommend for an area prone to flood?
So there are a couple tenant insurance / protection programs that do cover flood.
Ooh,
I
tell us
don't know if we're
more.
allowed to mention names, but
You are allowed because I think this is very helpful.
Yeah,
so
yeah, throw them out there.
I'm blanking on a name out of New York right now.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Lynn Sykes might be able to chime in here on this. But there's one out of New York, oh my gosh, that does cover flood insurance. Zercor.
Zerkor. Okay.
Bader.
There
Covers
we go.
flood
Shout out. Yep.
insurance.
So Raya put Zerkor. Yep.
Mhm.
So we now, the only store we don't go with our main provider is that store. We offer that, and so that would have been huge. I think, for a couple $1,000 would be a huge help there.
Wow.
For those folks. It doesn't cover the content removal or the property at all, but it does help the tenant out. I think if you're prone to flooding, those 3 buildings were in 1,000-year floodplains. We did not have to have flood insurance on them per our mortgage. We took it out anyways.
Ooh.
And honestly, we were paying $2,400 annually for that. I mean, it was super cheap because they weren't ever going to be affected, right?
Right.
So we did that, and thank God we did it. It's going to pay off for us, with a
Yeah.
$2,400 policy.
Yeah.
But so those are 2 things that I would say: make sure your protection plan, if you are prone to it, would cover it, or your insurance for your tenants would cover it. And then if you are prone, I would get flood insurance whether you need it or not.
Mhm.
Those would be the two things I would go to there.
Great
Lynn
tips.
Sykes said Bader covers flood as well.
There you go.
And
There
I
you
think
go.
Safe Store does too, if I'm not mistaken.
Couple choices out there.
But I'm sure there's more, because that's becoming more of a thing that we've just been seeing. So yeah,
It
check
is
with your
definitely-
insurance company.
it's
The
definitely a
other
thing.
thing we've done is we've built a little seawall on the side of our property. We have a creek about 500 feet away, but we built a seawall on that side because that's where the water came from. And we only raised it by 16 inches or something like that, so it's not gonna stop anything like we had. But we've done that too. So
Wow, that's huge. Thanks for that,
Yeah.
Kevin. All right, guys, this has been a fun afternoon. Disaster prep is not the most fun thing, but y'all really gave us some good. I mean, a lot of the debris, the tips on like the debris removal, right? Having the pre-planned text messages, that's killer. Love this. So in our question of the week, I want y'all to figure out how to give me your top 3 pieces of advice for handling and recovering from a disaster. You've given so much advice, and you're generous with your time and expertise here today, but give me just your top 3. Top 3 advices for handling and recovering from a disaster. Scott, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I mean, we've touched on all these things. I'd say number 1, have a well thought out plan. Number 2, communicate often before, during, and after. In whatever medium you can do so. Overdo versus underdo there. Act quickly, but intelligently, in terms of, like I had referenced staying in your lane when it comes to the insurance, and knowing when and where to press so that you don't inadvertently get in your own way. And I'd say number 4 as a bonus is just keep calm. Keep your composure, because those around you, whether it's your customers or your employees, you're having an impact on them. So if you kind of join the ruckus, it can be a negative thing versus being a calm, cool, collected head.
Yeah. I would piggyback on that plan. You've got to have a plan, even if you throw it out, you need to have something there to go off of. Be flexible. I mean, when it happens, just be as flexible as you can and know you're going to have to be pulled in a million different directions. And then the other thing I'd say is prep. Make sure you have things ready to go. We have Starlink and generators at 3 different properties now across North Carolina, so we can move them to and from. So if one's affected, the other one's not. So make sure you prep and you're ready to react.
That's awesome.
Love that. Great advice, guys. Well, Melissa, we did it again. 75 episodes. Crazy. Lots of good activity.
Yeah.
Big kudos, by the way, to the audience. Y'all rocked. Lots of great discussion, lots of great questions. And honestly, yeah, it's a little bit weird and scary that disaster is probably going to be potentially more frequent, and because it has been if the trend keeps going. But these are great tips from our guys. So Scott, how would people find out more about you or Sentry Self Storage if they have questions?
My website or my email address that I'd be happy to drop into the comments here. I'd be glad to. I love talking storage, kind of like you, Tommy. I mean, you always seem to be talking about it with anybody and everybody who will listen. So yeah, I'll drop my contact information in there real quick while Kevin's answering. And I gotta just say, number one, Kevin, best of luck with everything you're dealing with.
Thanks.
And as much as I'm probably gristled by having been around a long time in this business, you definitely, I would say, are pickled in terms of what you know and how you had to learn it. So
yeah, it's been fun.
Just been fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put my information down in the chat as well. So if anyone wants to reach out, feel free. I'll give my phone number out there too. So don't blow me up though. And if you ever need, like, if I think Scott and I both tell you, if you ever go through this and you just need some advice, just someone to talk to, reach out to us, because I think we'd both be there to help out any way we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Guys, thanks for being so generous with your time. Yeah, just check out the comment section there for how to get in touch with both Kevin and Scott. Of course, for those of you who want to watch the replay, Josh will get this on the Gabfocus Self Storage podcast wherever you get your podcast, and Garrett Pug will get this on storagepug.com and YouTube. So you can catch the replay and send it to your friends. In fact, bring your friends to the next episode.
There you go.
We're going to talk about choosing the right management fit. There's lots of ways to manage a storage facility now. There's remote, there's boots on the ground. Fewer and fewer we see like actual, like an apartment with the manager. Kevin, you mentioned one of your stores has an apartment or had an apartment. And you've got the hub and spoke, you've got hiring third party, you've got hiring the REITs, you've got hire a local partner. There's so many choices. So we're bringing Brad, who's an incredible dude, Brad North over at Vantage Management and Consulting. He's going to come in and talk about all the different options, because there's really truly not a one size fits all when it comes to management. And Melissa knows this. I mean, Melissa came from management, and honestly, just like you, just like Kevin and Scott, Melissa started as a front desk manager and grew all the way up to where she is today. So it's really awesome to see the different ways that self-storage can be managed. So see you there. It'll be September 25th. And then for those of us who are going to be in Vegas, have fun, safe travels, and I'll see some of y'all at Pug Pack dinner on the 4th.